And this was in the early days before you could do terribly much very effective with huge projections on stage. But they were doing a scene from a duet from one of Janacek's operas. And the soprano was real. There she was, standing on stage singing. And a huge projection, 50 times her size, of the face of the baritone who was doing the duet with her. And they performed the duet together, her live, and him huge, singing down at her. Theater is made up of magics of this particular kind. It's just not a bunch of people standing around arguing on stage. The amazing things that can happen in theater are things that absolutely delight me. Of fully half of my plays, I break the fourth wall convention, for example. You should think you should go to the theater and be a spy. I think it's wonderful when the characters turn to you and talk to you. I break the fourth wall convention all the time because I think it involves the audience in ways that are really infinitely more exciting. There's so many vital and wonderful things that can happen in the music of theater. But believe me, one of the most exciting was that 20 minutes that I spent in true, engaged conversation with a tiny little rag puppet. That was one of the most real theatrical experiences I've ever had.
A question from a young
playwright. Hi. You mentioned that playwriting and composing is similar, and I know that a composer is very much alone with the music as they're composing. I'm wondering, and different playwrights use the workshopping method, and some people stay in their study and just write in a solitary way. What is your approach? And I'm wondering, do you think that using the workshop method kind of dilutes the energy or the vision of the playwright? It's so commonly done these days, and I'm wondering what you think about that.
Yes, for those of you outside who couldn't hear the question, the lady is talking to me, asking me questions about what is probably the best way to proceed in writing a play, whether being absolutely on one's own or doing a play in a workshop situation, an improvised workshop situation with other people, and how this relates to musical composition. The composer is by him or herself. The composer puts down what he or she hears. The playwright is by him or herself, puts down what he or she hears and sees. The whole workshop situation, for the most part, is deplorable. The workshop situation is turning playwrights into cogs, small cogs in a large wheel, is diluting the creative act, is making the play merely something to be worked on rather than an individual act of creation. So I deplore most workshop situations because they are not there to make the play any better. They are there to take a play which is dangerous and make it safe, to take a play which has a lot of rough edges and sand all the rough edges down, to take a play which is going to upset people and make them think differently about their lives and give them 2 hours of an absolute waste of time. That's what most workshops are there for. But unfortunately, that's what so many people want when they go to the theater. Most people, when they go to the theater, don't want to have an experience that challenges them or changes them. They want to have something that relates to something they already know and isn't going to create any problems. That's one of the sad things in our theater. Have I silenced everybody else?
You're absolutely right.
There's a question from outside. What's the question? What made your interaction with Beulah so real?
What made my interaction with Beulah Witch so real? I had experienced her watching her on television for many years. I'd enjoyed her greatly. I believed in her existence absolutely, completely. An act of faith, as thorough as any act of faith which sustains us in our lives. Oh, by the way, happy Easter to everybody. What is that wonderful little poem that I vaguely remember about Easter? Spring has sprung, and Christ is riz. I wonder where the birdies is. So anyway, spring has sprung and Christ is risen. Birdies I don't care about. What made Beulah so real for me? She had been real. I've been longing to meet her for a very long time. The fact that she was made of a little sack of cloth and was manipulated by somebody with hand inside doesn't decrease the validity and reality of anybody. I have met many people, real people, whom I find infinitely less real than that sack of cloth being manipulated by one particular hand. What was so real about her? Probably because Bert Tillstrom, who created her, believed in her also, and was able to make her real enough so that she was real to anybody who wanted to come along for the ride. That's simple. His creativity made my acceptance and my participation possible. Pardon my coughing, I have a bad cold.
What inspires you?
Pardon me?
What inspires you?
What inspires me? I don't know what the term means. I really don't know what the term inspiration means. Would you define inspiration, please?
Where do you find your inspiration? How would you define inspiration?
Where would I find my inspiration? You're not defining
How
inspiration.
would you define it?
I don't. I don't know what the term means. That's what I'm asking you. What do you mean by inspiration?
When you begin your work and you're in the midst of it and you have that breath of genius, or that something that comes through. How do you find that?
I will be wandering around one day, minding my own business, as I very infrequently do, but nonetheless. And I will discover, all of a sudden, that I have been thinking about a play. I have not been aware of the fact until that moment that I've been thinking about writing a particular play. Which means that I've been thinking about writing this particular play long before I became aware of the fact that I was thinking about it. Now, this is what some people call inspiration, but believe me, the term is pointless and senseless. So, I've been thinking about something and it wants to be a play. Well, maybe I better find out more about it, find out why it wants to be a play. So over months or so, I will examine it more and more. It becomes realer and realer. The characters become more and more three-dimensional to me. The situation, the dilemma, and its solutions becomes realer to me. And I realize that I'm stuck with writing yet another play. And eventually, I have to write it down to get it out of my mind so I can do something else. So what inspired this? I don't know. I don't think anything inspired it. I think something generated a play in my mind without my being aware of what put it there. I've just talked to an awful lot of writers, and most fiction writers, and playwrights are fiction writers, most of us don't plan out what we're going to be doing very carefully. We usually discover that this is something that we have been planning to do, but merely haven't told ourselves yet that we're planning to do it. So, see, I think the creative act probably starts in the unconscious, or the subconscious, whichever you like, and eventually transforms itself and moves into the conscious mind. And there you have to deal with it. Either abandon it or go through with it. What starts it? It's like any infection. I used to say it was related to pregnancy, and like most pregnancies, you don't necessarily know how you got intellectually knocked up.